David awoke that morning with an unusual feeling of emptiness, a weight he couldn't name, but which sat on his chest like a dark, silent cloud. At 67, he had learned to rise early, to make his coffee exactly the way he liked it, to sit at his solid wood table facing the kitchen window, and to gaze at the sleeping neighborhood, where each house seemed to hold its own secrets. The pale winter light filtered through the curtains, tracing soft patterns on the worn parquet floor. Everything seemed familiar, reassuring, and yet something felt off inside him. For several weeks, David had this persistent feeling that he didn't truly know certain truths about his own life. And this doubt had a name, a face he had always known. His son, Michael. Michael had grown up before his eyes, with smiles, tears, successes, and failures they had shared together. Or at least, David believed he had. Michael's life seemed perfect on the surface. A successful lawyer, respected by his peers, married to a woman he loved deeply, and the father of 2 children he adored. But that morning, David felt a crack in this facade. A sudden intuition whispered to him that what he thought he knew about his son was incomplete, perhaps even misleading. He got up, limping slightly from a lingering pain in his knee, a remnant of his years of hard work in the machine shop where he had built his life. He put on his old gray sweater and went down to the kitchen. The smell of freshly ground coffee filled the room, and he inhaled deeply, trying to shake off the anxiety that was settling in like a shadow. He sat down, placed his hands on the table, and let his gaze wander over the wall covered in family photos. Each image told a story, each smile seemed to speak of shared happiness. But there was one detail that bothered him. The looks in some of the photos seemed to be hiding something, as if Michael had always known something David didn't. The memory of an old conversation, dating back more than 20 years, flashed through his mind. Michael, then a teenager, had asked him not to lie to him. David remembered laughing at the request, thinking it was typical of his son's awkward and rebellious phase. He hadn't understood then that the words would resonate differently decades later. The irony of time struck him cruelly. He, the father, was the one who was unaware of the most important truth about his own son. David spent his morning going around the house, checking things he'd checked hundreds of times before. The refrigerator, the living room table, the cupboards, the photographs. He stopped in front of an old trunk he'd hardly ever opened since his wife's death 10 years earlier. It was filled with letters, documents, and mementos he'd never bothered to sort through. That morning, he felt a strange urge. He had to look inside, as if some invisible force was compelling him to uncover something he wasn't ready to see. He opened the trunk carefully, and his eyes fell on an envelope yellowed with age. The handwriting on the top was Michael's, but the style seemed strange, almost unfamiliar. He hesitated, then slowly opened it. The words inside were simple, but their contents shook him to his core. There were details about Michael's life, choices, decisions, events David had never known about, lies skillfully concealed beneath years of silence and manipulation. He reread the sentences several times, unable to believe what he was reading. Each word was a small slap, each sentence a revelation that tore away the veil of illusion in which he had lived. The rest of the day passed in a fog of emotions. David sat in his favorite armchair, gazing out the window at the frozen garden. The tree branches shimmered in the cold winter sunlight, and the silence of the house felt more oppressive than ever. He thought back to Michael, to all the moments they had shared, to all the conversations that now held a different meaning. He wondered how he could have been so blind, how he could have seen nothing, heard nothing. The betrayal was there, palpable, but so was the pain of the unconditional love he still felt for his son. That evening, David decided to dig deeper. He began examining old files, invoices, bank statements, and letters he had kept for years. He discovered surprising inconsistencies. Unexplained expenses, missing letters, dates that didn't match what Michael had always said. Each discovery was a small blow, each hidden truth a wall crumbling around him. The weight of the accumulated ignorance over all those years was crushing. David felt betrayed, lost, but strangely alive. It was as if each uncovered lie awakened a part of himself he had forgotten. During the night, he tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Memories flooded his mind. The first time he had held Michael in his arms, the sleepless nights worrying about him, the teenage arguments, the advice given and ignored. Everything now seemed tinged with an ambiguity he could no longer ignore. The question that haunted him was simple and terrible. What else had he missed? What else had Michael hidden from him? The next morning, David made a decision. He had to confront his son. He had to know, even if the truth risked destroying what he believed to be their relationship. But before that, he wanted to understand, to gather the evidence, to organize his thoughts. He couldn't just let the pain fester. He had to understand his son, understand why he had lied, and why he, David, had been so blind all these years. The following week was a mixture of meticulous research and painful memories. David spoke to old acquaintances, friends Michael had known in his youth. He questioned colleagues, neighbors, former teachers. Little by little, the puzzle began to take shape. Each piece revealed an aspect of Michael he had never known, a facet of his life carefully hidden behind smiles and promises. The shock grew more intense with each discovery, but David felt he was finally getting closer to the truth. The tension was palpable, and he knew the moment of confrontation was approaching. At the end of this first part, David finds himself sitting in his living room, surrounded by letters, documents, and mementos. He breathes deeply, ready to face whatever life has in store for him. The house is silent, but the inner turmoil is immense. The viewer feels the intensity, the weight of the years, the fragility of a father-son relationship built on illusions, and the promise of a truth that could change everything. The next morning, David awoke with the same weight on his chest he had felt the day before, but this time accompanied by a newfound determination. He could no longer be satisfied with vague doubts or suppositions. Every thought of his son Michael haunted him. The smiles, the reassuring words, the supposedly true successes. A burning question now confronted him. What had his son truly dedicated his life to, and why so many lies? His daily routine, which he had once found comforting, now took on the air of an unsettling ceremony. The morning coffee, the newspaper open on the table, the cold winter light filtering through the window, everything seemed laden with meaning, as if the house itself were holding its breath, awaiting the truth. Every gesture took on unexpected significance. David scrutinized every detail, noted every memory that came to him, searching for inconsistencies, for clues. He began by rummaging through old photo albums, overflowing with yellowed and faded snapshots. Each photo seemed innocent at first glance. Michael as a child holding a ball, smiling at the camera. Michael as a teenager in his school uniform, a proud look on his face. But David began to scrutinize the details with a new intensity. The dates written on the back of some photos didn't match what he remembered. Some people in the pictures seemed absent at times when they should have been present. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but for David, each detail now carried immense weight. Curiosity became an obsession. David began keeping a notebook where he jotted down everything that aroused his suspicion. The little lies, the contradictions in Michael's stories, the awkward silences in past conversations. He remembered the family vacation when Michael had claimed to have studied in a university town, only to discover evidence suggesting he had never been there. The train tickets, the photos, the letters. Everything seemed to have been arranged to create a perfect illusion. David realized he had to dig deeper. He began contacting Michael's old friends, colleagues, and neighbors. He asked seemingly innocent questions, but each response only deepened his unease. A former classmate mentioned a university project Michael had never discussed at home, a project that didn't fit with what David believed to be his academic path. A neighbor recalled a sudden move Michael had never mentioned. The details piled up, each reinforcing the impression that Michael had created a parallel world, a carefully crafted narrative to deceive his father. Meanwhile, David continued his daily routine, but it had changed. Every interaction, every conversation with friends or acquaintances was tinged with suspicion. He listened carefully to the details, looked for inconsistencies, analyzed words, expressions, hesitations. Even Michael's tone in their past phone conversations now seemed suspicious. David replayed specific moments, phrases his son had uttered, promises that had never been kept, explanations that seemed vague or incomplete. Every memory was now a potential clue. David's discreet investigation led him to explore the bank and administrative documents he had kept. The bank statements revealed inexplicable financial movements, transfers to accounts David had never heard of. Official correspondence, invoices, and receipts suggested hidden transactions and decisions made without David's knowledge. Anxiety grew as he uncovered this tangible evidence, but at the same time, he felt a strange satisfaction. Each discovery brought him closer to the truth, and the idea of finally understanding the reality of his son's life gave him a sense of control he hadn't felt in a long time. The following days were a mixture of routine and intense research. David woke each morning obsessed with discovering what Michael had hidden from him. He took detailed notes, compared documents, and consulted his son's old school and work records. He sometimes visited places he knew Michael had been involved with, asking questions of people who had been close to him, carefully observing their reactions, and noting every nuance of their behavior. The clues were beginning to form a disturbing picture. Michael had built a life based on omissions and lies, and David wondered how far it would go. One night, David made a discovery that profoundly shook him. While leafing through an old notebook that Michael had left at his house years before, he came across passages detailing specific lies, plans for manipulation, and explanations on how to deceive his father without arousing suspicion. The shock was immense. It was no longer a matter of simple omissions or exaggerations, but of a deliberate and prolonged deception, meticulously planned over decades. Pain mixed with anger burned in David's chest. Every word in the notebook seemed to accuse him of having been naive, of having turned a blind eye, of having believed in a carefully constructed illusion. The following morning, David felt a mixture of determination and fear. He knew he had to confront Michael, but he wanted to be prepared, to have all the necessary evidence, to understand the full extent of the deception before facing his son. He continued his investigation, scouring archives, contacting people who had been close to Michael at different stages of his life. Each response, each document, each reevaluated memory added a piece to the puzzle. Weeks passed, and David began to feel the psychological effects of this quest. Constant suspicion, persistent doubt, and the anxiety of uncovering new betrayals weighed heavily on him. His nights were often sleepless, haunted by images of Michael and memories of shared moments. He wondered how he could have been blind for so long, how he could have placed his complete trust in someone who, clearly, had known how to manipulate that trust since childhood. Yet, despite the pain and betrayal, David felt a new strength within him. He was no longer the passive father who accepted everything Michael told him. He had become an investigator, a seeker of truth, determined to uncover the reality, regardless of the emotional cost. Every piece of evidence, every detail discovered, strengthened his resolve. He knew he had to face the truth, even if it meant confronting the deepest betrayal. One afternoon, David decided to revisit some of the places where Michael had grown up. The school, the park where they used to play together, the cafe where they sometimes had lunch after school. These places, once filled with happy memories, now seemed to hold secrets and revelations. Each place evoked memories that took on new meaning in light of his discoveries. David took notes, jotted down impressions, trying to understand how his son could have woven such a complex and coherent web of lies. A particular discovery deeply disturbed him. A letter hidden inside an old book he had kept in the library. The handwriting was familiar, but the words revealed a long-kept secret, a truth about a period in Michael's life that David had never suspected. The shock of this letter was so great that David had to sit down, trembling slightly, feeling the gravity of the situation weigh upon him. He understood then that what he thought he knew about his son was merely a carefully constructed facade, and that the real Michael had lived a parallel life, hidden from his eyes for decades. At the end of this second part, David finds himself at an emotional crossroads. He is both overwhelmed by the betrayal and driven by the determination to uncover the whole truth. The clues are there, the inconsistencies are numerous, and the confrontation with Michael becomes inevitable. The viewer feels the intensity of the investigation, the mounting tension, and the dramatic anticipation of the coming revelation. David woke up that morning with unusual nervousness. The weeks spent investigating his son Michael had taken their toll on his mind and body. The sleepless nights, the incessant thoughts, the weight of accumulated suspicions had altered his perception of the world around him. Every gesture, every interaction now seemed laden with hidden meaning. Even the coffee he made each morning tasted bitter, tinged with the anguish and uncertainty that gnawed at him. He decided to reread all the letters, documents, and notebooks he had found during his research. The inconsistencies were beginning to emerge with disturbing clarity. Some dates didn't match up, some events had never happened, and some of the promises Michael had made were nothing but cleverly constructed illusions. David felt a mixture of anger and sadness. How could his son have led a double life, concealing truths for so many years? And how could he, David, have been so blind for so long? His first major discovery came while examining old school and university transcripts. Michael had always claimed to have studied at a prestigious university hundreds of miles from their home. But David noticed that some certificates and report cards didn't match the official records. The dates seemed impossible, and some of the courses listed didn't even exist. The doubt, which until then had been an elusive rumor in his mind, transformed into a disconcerting certainty. Michael had lied. David realized that these lies weren't harmless mistakes. They seemed intentional, deliberate, constructed to create a perfect image in his father's eyes. Each lie had been carefully chosen to mask a more complex and disturbing truth. This realization hit David with brutal intensity. The pain of betrayal mingled with a growing fear. What other truths had been hidden? To verify his suspicions, David decided to contact Michael's former classmates and teachers. He proceeded cautiously, asking simple, seemingly innocent questions, but each response he received only deepened his unease. One former teacher mentioned a project Michael had claimed to have participated in, but which, according to his records, had never existed. A classmate recalled supposed trips to competitions, but no records corroborated these journeys. Every detail, every piece of evidence, added to the disturbing puzzle David was trying to piece together. One afternoon, David received an unexpected call from one of Michael's colleagues. The man, an experienced lawyer, seemed embarrassed and hesitant, but eventually confided a disturbing piece of information. Some of Michael's professional decisions had been presented as his own initiatives when, in reality, they were the result of other people's work. The facade of success and competence that Michael had constructed was beginning to crack under the weight of the truth. David began to connect these discoveries to personal memories. He thought back to past conversations, the advice Michael had given him, the stories he had told about his professional and academic life. Every memory now seemed tinged with falsehood. Every smile of Michael's veiled in deception. The reality he thought he knew was crumbling, and with it, the image of his son he had cherished for decades. The tension mounted even further when he discovered hidden financial documents. Some bank transactions had never been explained. Some accounts were unknown to David. The cold, impersonal numbers told a story no one had dared tell him. Michael had built a web of deception, manipulating information to create a perfect illusion. David felt his heart clench, a mixture of anger, sadness, and fear. How could his son have planned all of this with such precision? In the days that followed, David continued his investigation with almost obsessive determination. He spent hours comparing letters, documents, and testimonies, searching for the slightest inconsistency. Each discovery, each piece of evidence, reinforced his feeling that Michael's life as he knew it was nothing but a carefully orchestrated fabrication. The betrayal seemed complete, and David wondered if he could ever regain the trust he had lost. One evening, while looking through old photographs, David noticed something he had always ignored. Subtle clues in Michael's expressions, gestures, and glances that seemed to indicate he was hiding something. The photos, once symbols of happiness and innocence, now took on a different meaning. David felt a mixture of sadness and rage. How could he have been so blind? How could he have accepted, without question, the perfect version Michael presented to him? David's inner turmoil reached a breaking point when he discovered correspondence Michael had written but never sent. The letters detailed personal and professional decisions that contradicted everything David thought he knew. Every word seemed to scream his son's duplicity, every sentence revealing carefully buried secrets. David read and reread the letters, unable to look away, consumed by the gravity of the deception. Meanwhile, David began to ponder Michael's motives. Why would he have lied? Was it out of fear of disappointing his father, a desire to appear perfect, or to protect someone or something? Each hypothesis seemed plausible, yet none fully justified the extent of the deception. David felt the full depth of human complexity revealed. Love, fear, ambition, and lies intertwined in a tangle of partial truths and secrets. At night, David often found himself walking in his garden, watching the shadows cast by the trees under the moonlight. He wondered how to confront Michael, how to ask the questions that had been burning on his lips for weeks. The fear of confrontation mingled with the urgent need to uncover the truth. He knew the decisive moment was approaching, and that he could no longer turn back. The truth, however painful, had to be revealed. At the end of this third part, David is on the verge of a crucial realization. He has gathered tangible evidence, identified major inconsistencies, and finally glimpses the extent of Michael's deception. The atmosphere is thick with tension and anticipation. The viewer senses that the confrontation is imminent, that the truth can no longer be delayed, and that the father-son relationship is about to change forever. The day of the confrontation arrived with an almost tangible heaviness. David awoke that morning with a combination of anticipation and nervousness he had never felt before. Every muscle in his body felt tense, every thought focused on a single goal: to confront Michael and finally get answers to all those years of lies and secrets. He got up, dressed carefully, adjusted his watch, and took a moment to breathe deeply. The silence of the house seemed to echo the gravity of what was about to happen. When Michael arrived, he was immediately struck by the intensity in his father's eyes. It wasn't just anger or disappointment, but a profound gravity, a sadness tinged with determination. David sat him down in the living room, and for a moment, not a word was spoken. The two men looked at each other, each trying to read the other's thoughts. The air was thick with tension. David began slowly, his voice calm but firm. "Michael, we need to talk." Michael nodded, trying to hide his concern, but David could see the fear in his eyes. It was a mixture of guilt and realism. He knew he could no longer hide the truth. David explained everything he had discovered: the letters, the financial documents, the inconsistencies in Michael's accounts of his professional and academic life. Every piece of evidence was laid out on the table, every word spoken with a clarity and intensity that left little room for dispute. Michael listened silently, sometimes looking down, sometimes trying to respond, but each attempt seemed inadequate in the face of the mounting evidence and re-evaluated memories. "Why did you lie to me, Michael?" David asked, his voice trembling but resolute. It was more than a question. It was a plea for truth, a plea to understand why his son had chosen to build his life on illusions and secrets. Michael remained silent for a long moment. His hands trembled slightly, and his gaze was evasive. Then, in a trembling voice, he began to speak. He spoke of the pressure he had felt since childhood, the fear of disappointing his father, the need to appear perfect in every aspect of his life. He explained how every lie, every omission, had been intended as protection. For himself, for David, for their family. But despite his explanations, every word seemed insufficient to soothe the betrayal David felt. David listened, trying to control his emotions, but the pain and anger were too strong to contain. He stood up, took a few steps into the living room, and let out what he had been feeling for weeks, months, years. The words came out forcefully, laden with a mixture of frustration, disappointment, and love. All these years of trust, and you chose to cheat on me. How could you?" Michael, tears welling in his eyes, tried to respond, to justify himself, but each sentence seemed to fall on deaf ears. David's pain was too deep, too deeply rooted in the history of their relationship, in the sacrifices he had made for his son. He remembered every night he had worked, every moment he had put aside his own needs to give Michael a better life. And now, that life seemed built on a lie. The dialogue continued for hours. David asked questions, Michael answered, but the truth, though partially revealed, remained complex and painful. Michael explained certain decisions, certain omissions, but could not conceal the depth of the deception. Both men were emotionally exhausted, but there was an overwhelming need to continue, to get everything off their chest, to let the truth fully emerge. David recalled Michael's childhood memories. The happy moments, the smiles, the successes he had believed to be genuine. Everything now seemed tinged with ambiguity. Was it truly love, or simply a carefully constructed facade to avoid confrontation? Each memory became a test, a question about the reality of what he had experienced. At one point, Michael broke down completely. Tears flowed freely, and he confessed details he had never shared before. Financial mistakes, life choices he had kept hidden, relationships he had concealed. Each revelation was another blow to David, but paradoxically, it also brought a glimmer of understanding. Human complexity, fear, love, and vulnerability intertwined in these confessions, and David began to see not only the betrayal, but also the fragility of his son. The confrontation reached its climax when David asked the most important question. Michael, did you ever love me for who I am? Or was it always so I would believe in an illusion? The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. Michael lowered his eyes, unable to fully answer. It was a moment of brutal truth, a moment where love and deceit were inextricably intertwined. The discussion continued late into the night. David listened, asked questions, expressed his pain, and Michael revealed parts of his life he had always kept hidden. The confrontation was not merely an exchange of words, but a profound exploration of their relationship, their emotions, and their humanity. Every word spoken, every memory evoked, every tear shed heightened the dramatic intensity of the scene. As the hours passed, David began to feel a strange mixture of anger and compassion. Anger at the deception, pain at the wasted years, but also compassion for a son who, despite his lies, was human, vulnerable, and grappling with his own fears and shortcomings. This complex mix of emotions gave David a new clarity. The truth, however painful, had to be embraced to allow for some form of reconciliation, however partial. As the night drew to a close, the two men remained silent, absorbed by the weight of the revelations. The confrontation had revealed the depth of the lies, but also the depth of their feelings. David knew the road to understanding and healing would be long, but he had taken a crucial step. The truth had been revealed, and now, nothing could be ignored. At the end of this fourth part, the viewer feels the emotional intensity of the confrontation. The dramatic tension, pain, and betrayal are at their peak, but a glimmer of humanity and understanding begins to emerge. The father-son relationship is deeply scarred, but the possibility of reconciliation and reflection now exists.